Gentlemen, what is going on today? My name is Ryan Mickler, and I am the host and the founder of the Order of Man podcast and movement. I want to welcome you back today. Last week, you got to hear from Kip, and Kip did a wonderful job riding solo. He didn't have my insight, but he may have been better off for it because I think that was a pretty damn good podcast. Anyways, I thought we would do the AMA with just myself today since I'm going to be gone this week as well. I'm going to be recording podcasts with the one and only Andy Frisilla, who I know a lot of you guys follow, and I didn't want you guys to think that I was abandoning you. So I'm riding solo today. I'm going to answer questions from our Facebook group. I think we've got about 30 questions or so, some better than others, but I'll get to as many as possible. So if you guys are just tuning in for the first time, I don't know that this is necessarily the best podcast for you to listen to if you're here for the first time, but you certainly can. Or you can listen to our interview shows, which are recorded every Tuesday, released every Tuesday, I should say, and occasionally on Thursday. We've had quite a few guests over the past several months. And then we've got our Friday Field Notes, which is me just riffing and sharing some thoughts and ideas with you about life and what it means to be a man. And that's what this podcast is all about. It's all about becoming better men. So without hesitation, we'll jump right into these questions. By the way, if you want to join us in our Facebook group, do so at facebook.com/groups/Order of Man. What else do we have going on? We have our new Battle Ready program available. It's a 30-day course. You're going to get a series of emails over 30 days that are going to help you articulate your vision and your objectives and your tactics and make yourself battle ready. So check it out at orderofman.com/battle ready. You might hear a little bit of rattling around right here. If you're watching the video on YouTube, you can see I got a new little bracelet here. And I don't wear bracelets, but I do when my daughter makes me a bracelet. So if you hear some rattling around in the microphone, it's my bracelet that my daughter made for me. So deal with it. All right, here we go, guys. Let's jump right into it. David Patterson, he says, what is your take on the current state of America and all the chaos that's going on? Well, obviously there's a lot. There's coronavirus, and there's the Black Lives Matter movement, and then there's tearing down statues, and there's civil unrest, and there's defund the police, and then I think I saw something about murder hornets 2 weeks ago, and there's a potential new swine flu virus coming out of China. I mean, obviously we're in unprecedented times, but I think it'll all start to clear itself up come November. That's what I think. I think this is distraction. I think it's a ploy to get people riled up. I think that it's working. And I think that we ought to just all take a step back and, like we said when we were in middle school, just take a chill pill. Just relax. Chill out for a minute. Okay, look, we're coming up on, I think actually as of the release of this podcast, I'm trying to think when we release this. Yes, 4th of July weekend was last weekend, which is another issue right now. We're not supposed to celebrate 4th of July because of whatever. Guys, look, you can choose to be riled up about things, or you can choose not to be riled up about things. Coronavirus, I think, is real. I think it's marginally worse than the flu, which I've been actually saying for months now, and that's what the data is suggesting and supporting. I don't think face masks are as necessary as everybody's making them out to be. I also don't think that if you wear a face mask that you hate people and you don't care about people and you want them all to die, which seems to be a popular narrative. I believe if you want to wear a face mask, feel free to do so. I believe Black Lives Matter, not the organization so much as the statement itself, the words. I believe Black Lives Matter. Now, the movement is something entirely different. And that's actually a pretty good strategy by the organizers of the movement Black Lives Matter. Because if you say you don't support the movement, and I'll tell you why I don't support the movement. I don't support the movement because one of their things is to disrupt and undermine the nuclear, the nuclear family. And I am adamantly opposed to that. Obviously, if you've been listening to the Order of Man podcast for any amount of time, you know that the nuclear family is something that I believe is fundamental and foundational to a healthy society. And so I'm not going to support any organization that wants to undermine what it means to have a nuclear family, a mother, a father, and children engaged at home, loving, supportive of each other. That to me is the single greatest thing that this society can produce. And the more I feel like we move away from that, the more we move into situations that are not conducive to healthy environments, to success and thriving and our livelihoods in general. So I'm not going to support an organization that has that as one of their foundational principles on their actual website. I've even heard the organizers of the Black Lives Matter movement talking about being trained Marxists. I mean, you have to be a special kind of, I was going to say stupid, but I'll just say, because I'm feeling generous today, a special kind of ignorance to believe that Marxism and socialism can actually work. They never have worked. They never will work. And the more we can reject and be just absolutely disgusted and repulsed by that idea, the better off everybody else is going to be. So, coming down off my soapbox, guys, I think at this point, we need to worry about ourselves. Like I've been saying for 5 years, we need to be worrying about our families. We need to take care of our neighbors and the people that we have direct responsibility and some sort of authority or just relationship with, and let all this other bullshit go to the side. And I'm not saying don't talk about it, because we need to talk about it. Because if we don't talk about it, then the 2% of misguided souls, and I'm using that very nicely, and I'm trying to be very respectful here, the 2% of misguided souls will dictate what the other 98% of us are doing. So stop being silent. The silent majority thing that we hear about, I hate that phrase. Let's be the vocal majority. Let's actually act and work and move towards a better society rather than just working simply on ourselves. And that's part of what we're doing here with Order of Man. And if you get any value from what we're doing here, then share it. All right, share it with your friends and colleagues and coworkers and neighbors and whoever needs to hear the message of reclaiming and restore masculinity. Every person needs to hear it. And it's your responsibility to share it so you're not so silent and you start being more vocal. All right, I hope I answered that question. Tristan Schinzel, I think it's Schinzel. Tristan Schinzel. He says spot and stock or blind stand hunting. I do both. I actually prefer the spot and stock versus hunting from a blind or a stand. It's hard for me to sit still for any amount of time. If you've known me for any amount of time, you know that I've got a lot of energy, and I wouldn't say that I'm not capable of being focused, but I lose focus very quickly. So having my mind and my body engaged in finding an animal and stalking the animal and trying to get my shot is significantly more fulfilling and rewarding to me. Now, I'm not going to beat up on blind or stand hunters. I hunt every year in Minnesota out of a stand with my friends Sam Rodriguez and Matt Schmigdahl, and we have a great time. But if I had to choose, I would choose the spot and stock, the Western spot and stock. It's a lot more engaging, seems to be a lot more challenging, and we have a good time with it. So there you go. All right. Tyler Ewing says, do you have any favorite solo drills for BJJ? No, not really. I mean, I like to stretch when I'm by myself, try to move, maybe do some shrimping drills, things like that. I've actually considered one of those bags that is like weighted and looks like a human. I don't know how valuable that would be. Obviously, I don't think that would replace having a live training partner, but that might be something I'm interested in, something that I would get into if I'm solo. But yeah, I'm probably not the best guy to ask on that. There's probably other jiu-jitsu podcasts or resources. In fact, check out Chujitsu. But my friend Nick Albin, and he's got some great information on all of that. Okay. Ben Phelps. I'm not even going to answer this question. He's talking about the importance of railroad engineers. I don't know enough about railroad engineers. And then he's asking if trains are lame or unmanly. I don't know. That's kind of a weird question. So whatever. All right. Travis Fair Jr. He says, the state of law enforcement has caused me to rethink my life goals for the safety of my family. In your opinion, how should I get started on YouTube, podcasting, or mentorship? I'm actually going to pull up some notes here. Bear with me. Because I did a podcast the other day called, in fact, it wasn't a podcast. It was a show for the Warrior Poet Society Network. If you got, and it's exclusive over there, so you won't hear it anywhere else. If you guys are interested, go to orderofman.com/WPSN. Orderofman.com/WPSN. And I talked about the rules for making money. And this ties in nicely, Travis, to what you have to share here. So you're going to hear me shuffle through my notes here. The first step, focus on where your time goes the fastest. Okay, so I know, Travis, you're in law enforcement now. I want you to focus on where time goes the absolute fastest, because that's going to help you see where you have an affinity, where you enjoy, things like that. Number 2, build a community. You need to educate, inspire, and or entertain these individuals around the answer to question number 1, focus on where your time goes the fastest. Number 3, learn how to market. You've got to position yourself as a marketer first, and then who happens to be offering fill in the blank based on questions 1 and 2. Number 4, listen for clues from your audience. Your audience is going to give you clues about what it is they're trying to accomplish, what they want to do, what they want to get done, what their goals are, what their challenges and frustrations are. You can create solutions to those problems if you listen to them. And number 5, replicate what works. If something works, do it over again. If it doesn't work, tweak it, refine it, hone it, and then do it again. It's as simple as that. Not easy. This is a lot of work. I've been doing this for over 5.5 years now, but it is very simple, and it's a 5-step formula. Focus on where your time goes the fastest. Number 2, build a community. Number 3, learn how to market. Number 4, listen for clues. And number 5, replicate what works. All right, Michael Davis, homeschool versus public school in regards to teaching children history and instilling into the morals you want them to possess. I mean, look, the answer, we all know that the answer is homeschool. Whether you homeschool or not, we all know that the answer to teaching children history and instilling, this is most important, instilling the morals you want them to possess, the answer is obviously homeschool. Everybody knows that, even those who send their children to public school. And I'm not even going to beat up on that. I mean, we sent our children to public school for a very long time. Right now we do homeschool, and we have for the past, year now. But if you want to instill your morals, then you need them to be around your morals the majority of the time. When you put them into the school system, inevitably and inherently, they're going to be learning different things from other people. Now, that's not always bad. You want them to be well-rounded. You want them to have different thoughts and ideas and be able to think for themselves. But if you want to instill a certain set of principles and morals into your youth, then they need to be around you the majority of the time. So the answer is very clearly homeschool. And anybody who thinks anything differently is just flat out wrong. And hear me when I say this, guys. I'm not saying public school is wrong. I'm saying that if you want to instill, to paraphrase this question here, the morals that you want them to possess, then they need to be around you the most amount of time possible, which means you need to homeschool them. And homeschooling is becoming significantly more viable, significantly more conducive to ensuring that they get the social element that they need. Because look, when I was in middle school and high school, the homeschool kids were weird. I mean, they were straight up weird. And you guys all know that to be true if you're my age or older. They were weird. They didn't know how to socially interact with other people. They lost a lot of the emotional intelligence in dealing with other people. That is actually the value of public school. But learning is not the value of public school. They're learning what to think. They're not learning how to think. They're being conditioned. I mean, some of the things that I hear from young kids, 8, 9, 10 years old, is ludicrous and insane and disgusting. So the answer is obviously homeschool. And one benefit that's come from this whole coronavirus pandemic fear-mongering thing that's going on here is that more and more families are beginning to see that homeschool is a very viable option to ensuring your kids get the education they need. And you can do it. You can do it. Trust me, you can do it. We're doing it. I say we. My wife is doing it. I work. I'm here in the house. So I've created that environment with the help of her being able to support and teach. And it's been a very good thing for us. So the answer is homeschooling. Hands down, homeschooling. Okay? Even though there's value to public school. I'm not saying there isn't. There is value there. All right. Frank Hart, why isn't there leaders at the top? And maybe before ranting on masculinity, remember that those in charge are from a different generation that actually embraced masculinity. If you're going to ask me a question and qualify it and assume that I'm going to talk about things, like I'm not sure why you're even asking. It sounds like you've already got it. Okay? So if you already have the answer, you already have the answer. If you genuinely want to know my answer, I think the problem is there's a lot of conflict of interest. I think the problem is people are enticed and just power hungry. They get drunk on authority, and they're more worried about their election results than they're worried about doing what's right by people. This is why I think that if you are an American and you aren't fighting for term limits for our politicians, then you probably ought to consider that. We need term limits for our politicians. These assholes who are in power for 20, 30, 40 years. And you hear some of these politicians, we're going to make real change. Well, dude, you've been here for 40 years and you haven't done anything. So why are you telling us you're going to make changes right now? Is it because you're saying what your constituents want you to say? Is it because you're more worried about your re-election potential than you're worried about doing what's right by people? And if you're fooled by this, shame on you. If you're a citizen, a civilian, and you're fooled by these politicians who have been in politics for 30, 40, 50 years, and you think that they're actually serious this time, you're a fool. You're a fool. There's no better way to put that. These people aren't serious about improving your life. They're serious about improving their lives. And I want to get back to the point where we engaged in politics out of some sort of civic duty and civil responsibility, not an opportunity to build insane amount of wealth at the expense of our civilian population. It's bullshit. And every single man who's listening to this podcast right now better get behind the idea that we need term limits so these assholes who've been around for decades can get out of there and go try to add value in the real world, in the private sector, where they actually have to add value, and then people vote with their dollars whether or not they're valuable or not. This is the beginning of the solution to what we've been plagued with from these politicians who are destructive and downright dangerous to our democracy, to our republic, and to our way of life. So Frank, when you ask me why isn't there leaders at the top, is because they're more worried about themselves than they're worried about other people. Because we've created a system that rewards them for behaving that way. So we need to rearrange and dismantle the system so there isn't reward incentive for them doing nothing, or for them doing things that come at the expense of the average citizen like myself and Frank like you. This is a problem, and we need to get behind it. We need to rally behind. And you know what? I don't even care what side of the political aisle you sit on. I don't care if you're liberal or conservative, Democrat, Republican, libertarian, anywhere in between. It doesn't matter what side of the aisle you sit on. You should always be in favor of limiting these people so that we know, at least we have some idea that maybe these people aren't in it for the career, for the notoriety, for the potential income, for the conflict of interest, but they're there because they actually believe that they can do some good. I don't know if that's the case. When somebody runs for politics, I have no idea whether that person believes they actually want to do good or they just want to make a career in politics, because we've created the incentive and the system that brings that into question. That's what needs to be changed. Part of what needs to be changed. All right. Obviously, get a little fired up on this stuff. John Swarovski is how I would say his name. Swarovski. I think that's right. He says, are you familiar with the Tuttle Twins series of books, and are you using them in your homeschool curriculum? Excuse me. Do you think the ideas and concepts they cover are lacking in today's society, and is the lack of knowledge part of why we're in the mess we're in? I actually don't know about the Tuttle Twins series. Full disclosure, I bought them a while ago, and my kids are writing essays about the law right now. I don't know. I'm not familiar with what the Tuttle Twins series for homeschooling is. We use a program called The Good and the Beautiful, I think is what it is. In fact, let me look right now. The Good, because I don't want to tell you wrong, because The Good and the Beautiful sounds like a soap opera. The Good and the Beautiful Homeschool. Let me check it out. I'm going to give you this resource. Bear with me. Oh my goodness. Sorry, guys. Should have had this pulled up. All right. Yes, I was right. The Good and the Beautiful. That's the homeschooling curriculum that we're using. We've been using it for the past 12 months or so now, and it's been very, very good. We've had to supplement it with some other additional resources, but that's a great starting point. The Good and the Beautiful. I'm not sure about the Tuttle Twins. All right, David Osbjornson. Have you ever read Masters of Command by Barry Strauss? I have not. He says he would be a good guest on the podcast to talk about Alexander the Great, Hannibal, or Julius Caesar. Good to know. I'll check it out. Bo Dobbs. I'm a single father of 3 kids whom I have primary custody. I lost my job in IT when COVID-19 started. I also run a woodworking business on the side. I've been struggling with the decision of finding a quote-unquote regular job back in corporate America with being self-employed, pursuing my woodworking business. My fear for making that jump is that I'm the only source of income for my kids and I. I know God will provide for me, but I struggle with deciding which is the best option, self-employed or corporate. I appreciate any advice and insights on how to sort through the fears, pros, and cons. Well, look, I mean, there's risk in everything, right? I think most people would go to a quote-unquote regular job to eliminate risk because they think it's not there. But I think if anything, COVID-19 has told us and taught us that there is risk inherent in any decision that we make. And our job is to weigh the risk, the pros and the cons, and decide what's best for us. So, Bo, if you're listening to this, and anybody who might be in this boat, you just heard me talk about the 5 rules for making more money. Again, it's focus on where your time goes the fastest. You're already doing that because it's woodworking. Number 2, building a community around woodworking. Number 3, learning how to market. It's probably where you need to get good at. Number 4, listening for clues to what your audience wants. And then number 5 is replicate what works. So use that formula. And by the way, you can do that while you're doing a regular job. I had a 9 to 5. It was like a 9 to 7. I was doing financial planning, and I was doing that for about a year and a half before I went full time with Order of Man. But it took me a year and a half to build up Order of Man to the point where it replaced my expenses, not my total income, but just my expenses. So I think if you need to find a regular job so you have the stability and income, then you do that. But you have a plan formulated in place so that you can be out on your own. Yes, there's risk in being out on your own, but there's also benefits as well. And you have to decide, you have to weigh. Is the steady paycheck more valuable to you, or is the upward mobility and potential and growth and the autonomy more valuable? And if that's more valuable, the latter, then you need to go out on your own and you need to have a plan for doing it. Use that system. All right. Steven Zeller, what's the state of the U.S. and world 10 years from now? Best and worst case scenario. Well, best case scenario, I can say we learn from all this bullshit and we start thinking for ourselves. We get rid of the mainstream media and we continue to support outlets like Order of Man and other outlets that are independent of the collective media so that we can get, I won't say unbiased advice because I realize I'm biased as well, but that we get options. That we have an opportunity to access all sorts of information without the gatekeepers. There's a lot of attacks on social media right now, specifically with Facebook, mainly because Mark Zuckerberg is not folding to the mob, which is what they love him to do. But he said that he supports free speech. Twitter doesn't. A lot of these other platforms don't. And it's indicative by the way they run their platforms. So we need to be able to decentralize access to information, and I think podcasting is a very powerful medium to do that. So best case scenario, we continue to do that, and people will begin to make up their own decisions that will have some sort of awakening, realization that the route that we're going is not conducive and not helpful for anybody. Worst case scenario is that we don't learn these lessons immediately and we are attacked. Our systems of democracy and the republic are completely dismantled. We're attacked by some outside force. There's a lot of real threats that if we don't get our shit and act together could very well be a reality. So we better make sure that we have access to information. We better stand firm. Again, this is not about the silent majority. We make ourselves the vocal majority, the vocal majority. And we don't allow the 2% of people to dictate what the 98% of us are doing. There's also something I've been thinking a lot about, and I've been hearing a lot about this as well, is that we as men who believe in strength and honor and integrity and doing the right thing, we need to win the cultural war. Right now, lefties, and there's a difference between what it means to be a lefty and what it means to be a liberal. So I want you to understand that distinction. If you're curious about that, you can check out my podcast with Dave Rubin. Right now, the leftism, which is the extreme side, well, it has been. It's been the fringe side of the Democratic Party, is becoming more mainstream. And we need to reject those ideals and those ideas because they don't work. They've never worked. In fact, all it brings is destruction and death and horror and pain. That's not what we want. So we need to reject that, and we need to begin to think for ourselves. We need to introduce term limits for our politicians. We need to step up into leadership within our cities and states and the federal leadership as well. Otherwise, we're going to see some very difficult times. I hate to admit and I hate to say, but it's true. America will cease to be what she is because we're letting 2% dictate what the 98% of us believe. All right. Bradley, Chandler, thoughts on the two-party system or third-party politicians? Look, I'm not a historian. I don't study politics all that much, to be frank with you guys. But there's obviously issues with the two-party system. The two-party system is an issue because there's opportunities, for example, on a ballot where you can literally check one box and it says vote all Democrat or vote all Republican. And that's a problem. Like, I don't want ignorant people voting. You hear things like, it's your civic duty to vote. No, I actually don't want you to vote if you're not educated on the issues, if you're not involved. Like, I don't want you to vote. I want you to be involved. I want you to learn. I want you to experience. And if you do, then I believe you should vote, whatever side of the aisle that happens to be. But when it comes to the two-party system, it's hard for me to understand why. Well, I get it. It makes it easy. It's always the path of least resistance. Right? If I can vote straight blue or straight red, then I don't have to think. And isn't that the point? To let all these citizens and the civilians be little cogs in the wheel of the politicians and the authority and the power that would be. So educate yourself. Stop voting according to sides and start voting on who's going to be in your best interest. And that might be a third party. I think having a strong third party candidate would actually be something that would actually be very, very valuable for a society. If we had somebody who was well known or well recognized, and Joe Rogan is a great example. I'm not saying that he needs to run for politics or anything, but I was listening to a podcast that he did with Jon Stewart, and it was apparent that via that podcast, there was a lot of left-leaning thoughts and ideals because Jon Stewart tends to go that way. But I've heard of other podcasts where he has very conservative ideals and thoughts, and I think that makes for an interesting person, a well-rounded person. Most of us probably fall into that camp where we're not all Republican, we're not all Democrat, we're all not libertarian, we're somewhere in between. And on certain issues we believe this, and on other issues we believe this. And the two-party system is obviously going to create contention. That's actually the point of it. You're either this or you're this. And the labels that we put on ourselves are very dangerous. So I think it's a real threat to democracy. Let's see. I'm going to skip that question. Dallin Edwards. Can experience and research equal out to be the same thing? No. The short answer is no. For instance, a guy I started listening to talks about gunfighting tactics, and he gives his quote-unquote expert opinion because he has watched over 20,000 gunfights on YouTube and does shooting competitions. Some of his advice goes against common tactics taught by people that have been in combat. He does seem skilled, but can his research make up for actual experience? Well, this guy that you're talking about is probably an expert on shooting competitions. That's it. A shooting competition is vastly different than an intruder breaking into your house. It's vastly different than being assaulted in public. It's vastly different than being in a convenience store when somebody pulls out a gun. Now, fortunately, outside of the military, I have not been in one of those experiences, but being at a shooting competition is different than those other things. So when you say he gives his quote unquote expert opinion, I think and I hope that he's giving his expert opinion on how to become a competitive shooter. Because if he's talking about his quote unquote expert opinion, having watched over 20,000 gunfights, well, that's bullshit. Unless you've been in a gunfight, you don't know the dynamics of it. I experienced this to a very small degree in jiu-jitsu. I've always prided myself on being strong and athletic and capable, picking up on these things quickly and being somewhat athletic. And then you get to jiu-jitsu and you start sizing people up, because that's what we do as men. We size people up, and I've sized people up, and I thought, man, I could take this guy. I've got 40, 50 pounds on him. I'm stronger than him. I'm bigger than him. I'm athletic. I can take this guy. And all of a sudden he runs circles around you. And your whole world is shattered because you thought you were an expert on something and you were lying to yourself. Research doesn't equal experience. Knowledge doesn't equal wisdom. Knowledge is the information. Wisdom is the application. So if you're listening to somebody who is a competitive shooter talk with you about real world circumstances, then you're selling yourself short and you're buying into bullshit. If you want to get real advice on being in dangerous situations when actually somebody is shooting back at you, then you ought to learn from people who have been in that experience before. Because the dynamic changes, the nuance changes, the tempo changes versus shooting targets. And I'm not saying shooting targets is bad. If you're a competitive shooter, that's great. And that's wonderful. It's a great hobby. But it's different than when somebody else has a gun and they're shooting back at you and trying to kill you. So there it is. Tyler Walker, which Disney animated film has the best father to emulate in your opinion? I did see this one earlier. The answer is The Lion King. Obviously. I can't think about anybody else or anything else right now. So which Disney animated film has the best father to emulate? Lion King. The dad is the best. Mufasa is is it Mufasa? I can't even know. Yeah, Mufasa. Mufasa is the best father there is, right? He loves his son. He cares for his son. He sacrifices for his son. Like, doesn't get any better than that. It's not even a question. I don't know. Maybe you guys know of another one than I do, but yeah, it's definitely Mufasa. All right, Keith Daher. Favorite spot you have visited in Maine so far? My wife and I and kids actually went to Bar Harbor over the weekend. We celebrated our anniversary and just had 3 or 4 days of just spending time with the kids and having fun and having no agenda, and it was awesome. So Bar Harbor has been pretty good so far. We enjoy it. Chris Dalton, tips for starting BJJ. Had my first class this week. You guys have inspired me to start Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. My only tips are just be open and receptive, drop the ego, listen to your coach, and just be consistent. That's it. I don't have any advice other than that. Just be consistent. It's going to be up and down. It's going to be a roller coaster of excitement and despair and frustration and joy, and it's going to be everything. So just be there for the ride. Drop the ego. Just listen to what people are telling you. If they're giving you good feedback, then implement that. Do exactly what they say and take it all to heart, and don't feel like you have to win or prove yourself, because if you feel like that, then you're going to drop out. Because what you're going to find very, very quickly is that you suck at this. Because that's the nature of it. You suck at this. And if you want to win and you're basing your performance and your desire to continue to go based on you winning, you'll never go back, because you're not going to win. You're not. You're just not. When you start, you're not going to win. So redefine what winning looks like. Maybe it's not getting swept. Maybe it's not being submitted. Maybe it's keeping somebody in your guard or passing guard. But the whole goal here is to drop your ego, be receptive, be open. Like my children, for example, specifically my 4-year-old, they don't have egos, right? They're just there to learn. And when they trip or fall or trying to walk and they trip and they have to get up, but they don't like look around and say, oh, I'm embarrassed. They don't worry about that. So be like a child in that way. Hey, I got submitted. I'm not worried about how I look. I just got submitted. So cool. Tap, go back to it. It's the whole point. So just be there and present, enjoy, be there in the moment. You'll be fine. Greg Rocky Walker, do you see major civil unrest this fall with the COVID BLM and 2020 election? What are you and your family doing to prepare for it? I actually see there being civil unrest this fall if Donald Trump wins the election. I should say win. I honestly believe he's going to win re-election. So I think there's going to be a lot of civil unrest. I don't think there will be as much civil unrest if Joe Biden wins. I don't. And I think history kind of shows that. I don't know if you go back to the two parties or the way people view things, but I think if Trump wins, there's going to be a lot of civil unrest, and it's going to get ugly very, very quickly. It's going to get nasty. I think if Biden wins, I don't think that's going to happen. It shouldn't happen. Forget about politics. The guy definitely has some cognitive decline. I mean, that's unquestionable to me at this point. So forget about politics, but we're going to have somebody with cognitive issues potentially running the country. That's not a good position to be in. I think if he wins, I don't think there'll be much unrest at all. Honestly, I don't think. I think everybody will just, be pissed off or bugged or whatever, and they'll go on about their lives because that seems to be the way it works. But if Trump wins, when he wins, there's going to be a lot of unrest, and it's going to get ugly. So what am I doing? I'm making myself financially independent. I continue to do that. I'm making myself physically strong, capable by developing skill sets to protect myself and firearms. I've loaded up on firearms, munitions, and some extra things that I won't completely disclose. Food storage is important for us, and just making sure we're sovereign in all way. I look at what I'm relying upon, whether it's fuel or groceries or whatever, law enforcement. These are all things that I'm relying upon as a civilian. And I imagine myself being stripped away of those blessings, frankly. Defund the police is a perfect example of that. Like, what would happen if the police weren't here? I've had to call the police 3 times this year in the past 12 months. Minor things, but all of them have been open and receptive, and I've had a good experience with them, and it's actually been a pretty good thing. Everything's been resolved. But what would happen if police weren't around? And if police weren't around, I got to play out this scenario and wonder how I would defend myself and my family. In fact, we had somebody who tried to break into our home, tried to get into our house several months ago, and it stirred up some thoughts for me. Am I ready? Am I prepared for this? And in some ways I was, and in some ways I wasn't. So I need to make myself more prepared for those things. But look, whether Biden wins or Trump wins, I think we ought to prepare ourselves for civil unrest, for not having the luxuries that we've enjoyed in the past, because there's some misguided souls, to put it nicely, who are undermining the very fabric of society, a civil society. And we ought to be prepared for things not being civil, like no food available, no protection available, no fuel or other resources that we enjoy available, and ask ourselves, do we have the provisions to take care of ourselves? And do we have the ability to protect those provisions? Because those things will become valuable very, very quickly. And you need to be able to defend them. And if you can't defend them, then you might as well not have them, because you won't for long and you'll die in the process. Joshua Shoebridge, favorite Book of Mormon personality. Why? Obviously for you, Ryan. Yeah, Moroni. He's a warrior. He's a fighter. He's righteous. He's willing to go to work and put in the effort, and he leads men, and he fights for what he believes in, and he stands for what is right, and he's not intimidated by other individuals. So Moroni is the personality I enjoy the most. All right. Bob Ross. He's thinking about doing a pool deck add-on, looking at a HELOC or a personal loan. Your thoughts? There's some other things here. Look, why? If you're I don't even know how much a pool costs. Let's say a pool costs, I don't know, $15,000, $20,000. I don't even know. $20,000. Let's just say it's $20,000 for the sake of math. A pool is going to cost you $20,000. So you're looking at a HELOC or a personal loan. Why? Now that pool's going to cost you $30,000 because you put it on a 15-year loan. No, I don't. I think if you can pay cash for it, then maybe you ought to consider it. But if you can't pay cash for it, just buy a $1,000 above ground pool. We had one. It was a 15-foot pool, 5 feet high, I believe. And we had it last year. In fact, I got to get a new one, but all of them are sold out. I can't find them. Mostly because people are stuck at home via this COVID-19 thing. But man, we love that pool. I've got 4 kids and my wife. We jumped in that pool every night and we played around and we had fun, and it cost us $1,000. So look, if you've got to take out a loan to do a deck or an add-on or a remodel, I question whether or not you should do it. We have minimal debt. Our credit scores are both 800 plus. Okay, so you do say there are other options to consider if you can it looks like it's got a typo here. If you can't finance the entire project in cash. Yeah, I'd lean more towards that. I mean, you have to look at the time, the lost opportunity cost, the time value of money, and ask yourself, you know, if I put 20 grand into this thing, what could I have done with that 20 grand? There's certainly considerations, but yeah, I'm not for paying interest. I mean, that's what you're going to do. Eric says trade labor with a friend. That's actually a pretty good idea. I like that idea. Caleb Titus, what is the best way to make a difference during this current crisis our country is facing? Is posting our thoughts and articles on social media enough? No, talking is not enough. It's never enough. You got to act, you got to get involved, you got to push yourself into political positions, you got to put yourself in positions of leadership and authority and responsibility. You've got to be able to make these changes. You've got to get yourself sovereign as best as possible, financially independent, physically free and strong and healthy. You've got to build up your provisions and storage. You've got to enlist other people. You've got to teach them new skills so they can defend themselves. You've got to be in positions that allow you to make decisions and dictate the course of your community or your state or your country. No, it's not enough to post articles on social media. Get involved. Go to town hall meetings. Run for office. Yes, share stuff on social media, but also do the work. Talking is never enough. You've got to do the work, and you've got some great examples there. Gavin Lynch. What do you say to yourself mentally on the days when your drive and emotions are not following your goals? I tell myself to stop being a lazy piece of shit and get to work. That's it. Because look, there's days where I don't want to do stuff. There's days where I don't feel like it. But the way I feel about something has no factor or relevancy in something that I already committed to doing. So I tell myself, hey, stop being a lazy piece of shit and get to work. And that seems to work. Because I don't want to be a lazy piece of shit. And Gavin, neither do you. So if you equate slacking off and engaging in activities that are direct odds with your goals, and you view those as being a lazy piece of shit, and you know you don't want to be that individual, then I think you're going to reject it. I mean, I don't really have a hard time kicking my ass into gear because I don't want to be that guy. I've talked about it on the podcast at length. The natural man. He's lazy, he's weak, he's cowardly, he's pathetic. He wants the results without the effort. He's a lazy piece of shit. And I don't want to be that guy. So when I'm tempted to be that natural man, and I am, just as much as any other man, I tell myself, I don't want to be that guy. I want to be this guy, the guy who's motivated, inspired, he's disciplined, he's focused, he has integrity, he follows through on his commitments. And when I'm doing anything to the contrary, I say, stop being that individual and start being the individual that you know you can be. And that's simply a choice. So that's what I say. All right, I've got another question here. It's anonymous. He says, how do I communicate with my kids when they compare me to my ex's new boyfriend? It's usually things that don't matter, like he's stronger than me or has tattoos, but I don't. I don't want to come off as hateful since they're only 5 and 3, but I want them to know that the things that matter, I guess. Well, I mean, there are going to be differences, and that's fine. So when they say he might be stronger than you, say, yeah, he might be, and that's good. This is hard because we got to drop the ego right here. Like, isn't it good that he has some characteristics that are going to serve your children best? I mean, he's going to be in their lives, whether you like it or not. So isn't it good when they point out good characteristics? Now, I don't know that stronger is obviously the best character. I mean, it's good. You want to be strong. Tattoos certainly isn't a characteristic for or against whether somebody can be honorable or have integrity or be the kind of man that can lead children. But yeah, I think you just explain differences. You got a 5 and 3-year-old, when they say he has tattoos, but you don't, say, well, you have blonde hair and you have brown hair. Does that really matter? No, it doesn't matter. It's just different. That's it. So at a young age, I think you just kind of explain that, yeah, everybody's different. Some people have blonde hair, some people have brown hair, some people are white, some people are black, some people are strong physically, other people are strong mentally, some people are creative, some people are more interested in following systems, and they're maybe not as creative, but they can follow through on a process. Like, everybody's different. We all have strengths and weaknesses. And I think you talk to them like that. But just be careful of letting your ego get in the way. Like tattoos, that doesn't matter. So you need to explain, for example, that it doesn't matter, or that he's stronger than you. I mean, yeah, maybe he's a power lifter or whatever. Does that mean that you can't provide and take care of your family? Well, no, of course not. So you need to explain that to him. Okay. Jason King, he says, what dogs are best? German Shepherds. The end. Eric Shepley says, by the way, Jason, on that, I say that because our German Shepherd is the best dog that I've ever had. The absolute best dog I've ever had. So I'm biased. Eric Shepley, what would you tell someone that feels they missed out on serving in the military? Well, you can serve in the military. You can always go back. I mean, unless your age is there. Otherwise, you can support the military through charitable organizations, through starting a charity, an organization, through other companies who are supporting military members and veterans. You can donate to charities. There's ways that you can maybe not serve in the military based on your age, but that you can contribute. And if you're in the position where you can, then maybe if age isn't a factor, that you can still do that. So take advantage of it, even if it's the National Guard or the Reserves. I was in the National Guard. Now, my unit got activated in 2005, and I went to Ramadi in 2005 and 2006. But yeah, I mean, you can go to the Reserves, go the National Guard route, or you can support the military. That's what I would say. Victor Stearns, how often do I train? Oh, I train every day. I train jiu-jitsu 4 to 5 days a week, and the other days I train in my gym, which happens to be the garage. So I train every day without fail. Ryan Cannon, how do you silent kill a deer eating my garden without alerting my neighbors and the authorities? I don't know. Maybe you can tell me, because I might have some of those issues as well. I don't know. Just put up a big fence or put it in a greenhouse. There you go. How do you stay connected with God when you're deployed or on long business trips? You do it the same way you would do it when you're at home, right? You read the Bible, you pray, you surround yourself with other godly men, and you do the same thing. I don't see why this would be any different to stay connected with God when you're deployed or on long business trips as you would be with home, unless your wife and your kids are the only thing that are helping you stay on track. And if that's the case, you're selling yourself short. So read the Bible. Have a devotional. There's plenty of apps available. I don't do a devotional. I just read. But if a devotional helps you, use that. Pray. Find yourself with other godly men. Go to church. That sort of thing. Andres Maldonado says, what happened with the interview with Brian Mitchler? Well, I was gone last week. I'm gone this week. So I'm thinking in the next week or two, Brian Mitchler will be available. Eric Page. Let's see how we're doing on time here, guys. We're about 50 minutes here. Eric Page. How do you date around, evaluate a person when making new friends? I say date because when you hang out with someone for the first time, it feels like it's feeling them out to see if they meet your expectations. Well, and there's more here, but I would say be careful of that term hang out. I hate that term. I'll explain that in a minute. You're learning whether you want them in your circle. I've had a rough life and trusting people is difficult, but new friends. Okay, so he's not talking about relationships. I guess he's talking about relationships and not. I mean, look, you're not hanging out with people. That's the thing I would make a distinction about. If you're just like hanging out, hanging around, like why are you doing that? Everything about your life should be intentional and deliberate. So if you're trying to make new friends or get involved romantically with somebody, then that's your intention. It's not to hang out. So reframe it from hanging out to I'm trying to identify if this is somebody I want either in my circle or want to be involved with romantically. And that'll change from just making it so casual and flippant, like, oh, I'm just hanging out. That's passive. I'm not hanging out. I'm spending time with this individual because I like what they have to say. I like who they are. They might have something to add to my life. I might have something to add to their life. Whether, again, it's a friendship or even romantic relationship, is not hanging out. It's intentional. It's deliberate. This is why so many men are failing. Because they think that they're just kind of like going along with whatever, like whatever happens, like I'm just here along for the ride. No, man, get in the cab and get behind that steering wheel. Be assertive. Take charge. Grab that wheel and crank it where you want to go. So it's not hanging out. It's intentional. If you spend time with some other guys and you're like, hey, these are guys I'm considering not hanging out with, but these are guys that I'm considering bringing into my inner circle, then I think you're going to start looking at this a little bit differently. It's not going to be an interview. You're not grilling them necessarily, but you're thinking about it differently. Because I can hang out with anybody. That doesn't mean I want that person to be involved in my life in any capacity. So be more deliberate, be more intentional about it. Jimmy Inman, how do you navigate an honorless society that is developing into secular cultist hybrid survival of the fittest dystopia? Well, I think I might need a dictionary to translate what you're asking there. It's funny, we use words. I'm like, maybe I'm not smart enough to know what these words are. It's just an interesting question. How do you navigate an honorless society that is developing into a secular cultist hybrid survival of the fittest dystopia? I mean, look, I'll take the first part. How do you navigate an honorless society? Because we do. We live in a degenerate society. There's no doubt about that. Religion is going by the wayside. Culture is going by the wayside. Honor is going by the wayside. People are having sex outside of marriage. People are having children outside of marriage. They're not getting married at all. They don't believe in a higher power. This is an increasing trend, and it's dangerous. So how do you navigate in an honorless society? Well, there's still honorable people out there. There's still people who believe in some of our traditional values and traditions of culture. And those are the individuals you spend time with. And then you share with other people why it's important. Like why? I mean, we're doing this here with Order of Man. Why is it so important that we live lives of honor and character and strength? Because to the person who's never heard this before, maybe they grew up without a father figure, or they grew up in a difficult situation where nobody ever taught them why it's important to be honorable, to have integrity, to follow through on your commitments, to sacrifice, to be disciplined. Believe it or not, there's people who've never heard this stuff before. And what a powerful opportunity for you to teach them, not from the position of responsibility, like you're going to be responsible. Like who wants to do that? But hey, you're going to have a damn good life. Oh, and by the way, in order to have that damn good life, you got to be responsible. This is what we need to do. We need to become, and I said this earlier when I was talking about rules for making money, we need to learn how to become good marketers. We're not good marketers. The overwhelming majority of us, like we think that, if it's logical or rational, that people will believe it. Well, we don't make decisions based on rationale or reason or logic. We make them based on emotion. So when somebody's in a shitty situation, maybe you ought to make the connection between living a life of honor and then being in a better spot financially or romantically or physically or intellectually or emotionally because you're living a life of honor. So how do you navigate? You have to be that yourself, and you have to teach the people in your direct sphere of influence, which is your wife and your children, maybe your colleagues and coworkers, and to a lesser degree, your neighbors. And yourself, by the way, too. You've got to be that individual. And then as you become that individual, then it spreads outward and outward and outward and outward and outward. And as you prove to yourself and the world or God, however you want to look at it, that you're capable of being a good steward over yourself and other people, then you will be blessed with the opportunity to reach more people. The only reason that I can reach more people through this podcast is because I've proven that I have ability to reach a smaller amount of people. And when I prove that I have the ability to reach and connect with a smaller amount of people, the world opens itself up and men make themselves available to be taught and learn from a greater number of individuals because I'm capable of handling this. So am I capable of handling this much more? Too many of us jump ahead and we think that I gotta save the world. I gotta make a dent in the universe. No, bro, you gotta make a dent in yourself. You gotta fix yourself. And then you gotta relay that to your children and to your wife and to your neighbor across the street. You gotta mow his lawn because he's recovering from surgery or just had a medical procedure. Like you gotta serve in your community on your school board and get elected to city council and mayor. And then you gradually grow and expand it from there. It's a good question. I just had a hard time understanding the secular cultist hybrid survival of the fittest dystopia. He also asks, this is a secondary question, can Stoicism work with faith-based principles, or will they go head-to-head at some point? I don't see the conflict there, Jimmy. I don't think there's a conflict. I mean, Stoicism is just understanding your emotions, focusing on what you can control and what is outside of your control. I don't think they're at odds with any sort of faith-based, certainly Christian. I'm Christian, so I've never felt any sort of Stoicism ideas being at odds. In fact, I've heard people say that, but I'm not sure why they think that they're at odds. Maybe you can enlighten me, because I don't feel like they're at odds. I feel like Christian principles and Stoicism go hand in hand. Like, have responsibility, focus on what you can control, temper your emotions, live a life of honor and virtue. Like, isn't that basically in alignment with Christian values? I've never found any sort of conflict in the two. And maybe you have, and you can enlighten me and tell me what they are, but I've never felt that way. All right, let's take a couple more here. I think we have 2 more. Craig Perkins, what's the single biggest obstacle you've had to overcome while building Order of Man? You know, I don't think there's been a whole lot of like these big, it's this big obstacle, I need to overcome this. It's little day-to-day things like, you know, we need to get the price of our t-shirts down, or we need to reach more people on the podcast, or, you know, there's the Facebook group is getting away from its initial mission. It's things like that. Like, it's never like this one thing that I have to like overcome, and as soon as I overcome this, I guess the only thing I could answer that question is just my mindset around building wealth. I used to believe, for example, that there was a conflict between adding value and offering a valuable service to you and society and making money. And what I've realized for me is that there is no distinction. There doesn't have to be a distinction. They don't have to be at odds with each other. In fact, they can complement each other. And Order of Man is a for-profit business. I'm proud to say that. And I'm proud to say that we've built a very lucrative business so that we can go on and serve other people, and my needs and my desires can be served as well. But the single biggest obstacle, I would say, is myself and my mindset around making money. And as soon as I figured that out, as soon as I reconciled the discrepancy in my own mind, it was never there, it was just in my mind, between adding value and making money, I began to make more money. I began to live a more fulfilled life, and I began to be able to invest in things that would generate more value for you and everybody else who's tuned into what we're doing here with Order of Man. All right, last question. Rick Diamond, what would you do with a 450-acre ranch? Well, good question. I'm about a ninth of that. I've got just under 50 acres here, and I haven't really done anything with it. We've got somebody who hays the field, so he's a cattle rancher, and he hays the field so it can stay open. I've got a little food plot for the deer. We've got a little track that we run on with the side-by-sides. My wife's got a little space for her garden. We've got some space for the kids. Ranching isn't something that I'm even remotely interested in. So I don't know what I would do with a 450-acre ranch. I'd probably just live it up and enjoy it. Maybe get some cattle, maybe hire somebody to help head that up and manage that and lead that, and then just continue to do what I'm doing here with Order of Man. I mean, you're asking me what I would do. That's what I would do. If I was interested in ranching, then I would get into ranching. It's all a matter of what you're after. Good questions today, guys. Appreciate it. I think we're roughly an hour right now, so we'll wrap things up. But like I said, good questions. If you guys are interested in following up or want to have more discussions, join our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/orderofman. Join our Battle Ready program at orderofman.com/battleready. And consider banding with us inside the Iron Council, which is our exclusive brotherhood. We've got just under 600 members right now, and you can do that at orderofman.com/Iron Council. All right, guys, we're going to be back next week for a very powerful interview, and I hope that you're enjoying it. I hope you're getting value. Keep asking the good questions, and I'll keep giving you the best answers that I possibly can, some better than others. All right, guys, make it a great day. Go out there, take action, and become the man you are meant to be.